2020 was a bit lackluster in terms of anime this year, in comparison to the prior 2 years, amongst all of the other things that 2020 was, naturally partially due to the pandemic moving a lot of anticipated sequels to 21. But we continued some beloveds like Haikyuu, Re:Zero, the underrated Golden Kamuy, the historical action comedy drama Kristen Diff Quentin Tarantino made an anime, maybe, and my personal favorite isekai, Ascendance of a Bookworm, where this time the ordinary teenager teleported to a fantasy world with extraordinary magical ability saves the fantasy world with modern product invention, capitalism, and gradual system reform. There were only a handful of new series that primarily stuck in my memory, but among these included My Next Life is a Villainess, where a girl gets spirited away into the world of her favorite otome game in the body of the villainous character. But instead of going the obvious route of possibly trying to change the game so she wins, if only for the sake of self-preservation, she goes, well, I can't change the story, guess I'll go prepare for the worst. But she's so oblivious and naturally good-hearted that she befriends everyone and unintentionally accumulates a multi-gendered harem. Do you know how hard it is to create a lead in a harem or reverse harem series that's genuinely likable? Science Falls in Love, featuring a group of scientists that try to science a bunch of rom-com cliches to avoid talking about their feelings. I can't say much to the objective quality of the series, but I did enjoy it because, sure, knowing some science stuff helps with some of the jokes, but mostly that applying science to romance tropes is great for making fun of romance tropes and how dumb they are, but also works when you realize how stupid these scientists are. Why doesn't the dramatic wall slam work when you do it over and over again? Of course, it could have been even more subversive, but I will take it. One of the big contenders of anime of the year this year was The Great Pretender, about a swindler that gets roped into joining a group of international con artists that make these ridiculously elaborate schemes to extort money but also expose and humiliate corrupt elitists. The series is certainly one of the most aesthetically stylish of the year, with its saturated colors and jazzy instrumental soundtrack. Every character gets a chance to be fleshed out and expand on their backstory, and sure, it's fun to watch rich pricks get their asses handed to them, but I don't think the bond between the main cast ever really clicked or was as tight as the writers maybe thinks it was. Also, the end of the series comes off as a bit too clean. Our protagonist has gone through some shit, and certain people definitely deserved way more punches to the face. And I know that this anime has people split, but I'm gonna stick up for Japan Sinks 2020. Yes, it's depressing and oddly paced, the art has off moments, the protagonist doesn't start off very likable, and the whole cult thing is a bit of a tension pit hole. Boy, I am really selling this! And there's shifts between characters being a little bit too lucky and a little bit too unlucky. Kinda like if you were stuck in an apocalypse where Japan is sinking into the ocean. You do kind of have to be on board with disaster movie logic, though for me, it never gets as straight up ridiculous as something like 2012. To some people, that may be the deal breaker. Disaster movies might only work if they're absolutely insane. I'm just usually fascinated seeing how these kinds of doomed disaster scenarios play out and how everyone reacts to it. There's a pervasive theme about diversity and nationalism, contains one of anime's few trans male characters, and in an industry where they so often fail at the finish line, it's a great ending and a good payoff. Not that I would insist people absolutely miserable watching this to hang in there just for that. But if we're talking about what I would consider anime of the year, personally, there's only two real contenders for someone who still has not watched Re:Zero. The first is Beastars. Yes, the aptly described R-rated Zootopia. But where Zootopia's world did have a fair amount of world detail for a self-contained film, was more about drawing parallels to real-world prejudices. While Beastars, being a series, was really able to flesh out its anthropomorphic animal society and really explore how the unique animal attributes would affect the culture. The series follows a gray wolf Legoshi, who is in conflict with his identity as a predator, in the way that he is constantly externally judged for what he is, especially when the school experiences a murder and he is instantly suspected, but also confused and scared of his natural predator instincts, which get even more complicated when he develops an attraction to a small rabbit. So, for everyone who wanted Zootopia to end slightly differently, there's a big emphasis here on interspecies relationships. There are touches of some of the prejudicial angles of Zootopia, but it's much more focused on exploring the individual characters, what circumstances they've had to live with being what they are, and what strategies and defenses they've adapted to live in this very potentially dangerous society. There's always the question in series like these on what the point is to make their characters anthropomorphic animals. BoJack essentially did this for a variety of character designs, but mostly for the sake of puns and visual gags. But its use in Zootopia, but even more in Beastars, really highlights the subtle social constructs like levels of privilege, paranoia and fear of others, especially when the series opens with a predator-prey murder, and how much many of us have to restrain what we really are in order for society to function. Plus, this series made CGI look real good. Good on you, Beastars. But if anyone wanted to be a real stickler and insist that Beastars is technically a 2019 series that just didn't come to Netflix until March 2020, Anime of the Year is pretty easy. It's Keep Your Hands Off the Eizouken. Though I do understand that's semi-dependent on how much of an animation dork you are. Created by Devil Baby's Masaki Yuasa, Eizouken is about 3 girls forming a club to make animation. And a lot of the series is the process by which the girls are inspired and make their craft, jumping into storyboards to display their thought process, and the dozens of tiny insights that make both newbies and professional artists and filmmakers go, this is my life. But as opposed to something like Shirobako, by setting this in a club at a school, we not only get to see a group of passionate beginners really be able to learn and grow with the process, in the same way that animation newbies may be able to learn from this, we're able to see on a small scale some slightly more comprehensible representations of some of the other irritants professional creatives eventually have to deal with, like funding, and permits, and deadlines, and asshole bureaucrats. Now, at times it does feel a little overly technical, which might make it hard for some people to get into this series, but it's still able to put a lot into our characters. Much of the screen time is just the interaction between these 3 girls with very distinct looks and personalities and ambitions and histories bouncing off each other, while each of the girls representing the different creative types you often find in people that attempt to do animation, like the perfectionist, the pragmatist, and the I need to wait for the right inspiration to strike me. And thank goodness this isn't just stock anime dialogue either, but also just this setting. This school, this town, is something so unique and eccentric. It by itself gives the series a very distinct personality. In just the first couple of episodes, just watching the girls explore and getting around this odd space. Also, Kanamori is best girl out of the entire year, and anyone who says otherwise is wrong.